Well, it looks like things just keep getting worse for Ford when I thought the worst was over with. And it's actually gotten so bad that as of today, Ford cannot sell any of the F-150 trucks that are on this lot. And it's not just the F-150 that they can't sell right now. The Super Duty cannot be sold as well. And that's because there's a massive problem with these trucks that was just announced, that Ford had to completely just shut down the sales of these trucks until that issue is fixed. And what that means is they had to issue a stop sale. Thanks to PDS Debt for sponsoring this video, but more on that later. After hitting a record number of recalls this year, Ford just issued another recall for their trucks. This is terrible news for dealers, as trucks are the bread and butter for Ford. If they can't sell trucks, then they're completely out of business. So in this video, I want to talk about this new recall that's affecting the F-150 and all of the Super Duty trucks. I want to talk about some of the least reliable brands that are out right now, and then also talk about some of the most reliable vehicles with the least amount of recalls. That way you know what vehicles to avoid and what vehicles are actually worth buying that will cost you the least headache. And I'm starting right here at Ford because of this recall that is a complete stop sale for the F-Series trucks. That includes all of these Super Duties you see behind me and any of the new 25 and 26 Ford F-150 trucks. Now, what is a stop sale? I don't know if I've ever explained what a stop sale is before, but here's like the basics. What that means when someone puts a stop sale on a vehicle as a company, that means, you know, any of these trucks sitting here in this row that are on the lot currently cannot be sold to customers, and they also can't be demoed, which means that can't be test driven, because if this failure happens during a test drive, obviously that looks really bad on Ford or any manufacturer. If a defect pops up while they're doing the test drive, obviously that's a big problem. And Ford's not the only one that had to do a stop sale this week. In one of my last videos, Corvette was actually put on a stop sale, and I even showed you that they had two Z06s in the back of that Chevy dealership that had a do not sell sticker in the window until the recalls are fixed. So basically, until the recalls are fixed, the dealers have to just sit on these and wait. So what is the big problem causing the F-150 and the Super Duties to not be able to be sold? So as you can see here on this article by TFL Truck, it says Ford recalls 355,000 F-Series trucks and issues a stop sale due to failing instrument panel display. So basically what happens is the display panel, after a series of certain on and off, back and forth kind of things, completely just stops working. And that's a huge problem. And it's one of the issues with new vehicles right now, like relying on a screen for everything and the whole screen just goes out really sucks. And that's the difference between like analog gauges. The biggest thing we had to worry about with analog gauges on your cluster was just a light bulb going out. But at least even if one of the light bulbs would go out, the rest of the analog instruments are there. There's still some lights in the background and you'll still be able to see it even if one bulb goes out, and then you just replace the bulb and it's done. But with this screen issue, if the screen goes out, you can't do anything with the car. You can't change functions, you can't see warning lights, you can't see how fast you're going, and obviously if the screen goes out on any of these new trucks on the lot, you just need to stop. And right now, this article says it impacts all 2025 F-150s and 2025 and 26 F-250, 350, 450, and 550 models. And it says the instrument cluster screens can go blank on startup, making it impossible for the driver to get critical information like vehicle speed and warning lights in certain conditions. They don't go into specifics on what those conditions for the cluster going out are. And the recall also affects vehicles built last year in 2024. So if you've got an F-150 built in 2024, I would bring it into the dealer, because they did say that about 90-something people have brought those in and had to have this gauge cluster fix. And there is a fix for it, and it's pretty simple. It's just a software update. They just got to plug it in, update the software in the gauge cluster, and they're good to go. But for a dealership, that's a lot of work. They're gonna have to take every single one of these F-Series trucks, all of these, back into service and do that reprogramming for that gauge cluster. That's gonna be a lot of work on their part. And so they can't sell any of these trucks until they make sure that gauge cluster is working and that update has been processed. Now there's a sales guy driving away in that Expedition right there. And I did talk to him to confirm that they're taking every single one of these F-Series trucks back into service, plugging it in, updating the cluster, and then the fix is done. So they're being very proactive in fixing this. And I do want to note that Ford actually does not make the gauge cluster in their vehicles. Some other company makes that. And so It's one of those times where this is really not the fault of Ford quality control. It's more quality control on one of their suppliers, basically, at this point. So Ford really couldn't have done anything about that. I will say, even though Ford has had like a record number of recalls right now, they are doing everything that they can to fix it. So they could be ignoring these problems like GM does and pushing it back till there's a catastrophe. But I think them taking a proactive approach to fixing this stuff as fast as possible is a pretty good thing. Now, this isn't the first recall for the F-150. And as far as the F-250, 350 Super Duties go, there's also been a pretty bad recall for that. And they've already had a fix for it. At one point, the Super Duty was recalled for a potential brake failure, and it was so bad that owners were actually told not to drive them, and so they would have them towed into service to make sure this point of failure on the brake system was completely fixed. With the average new car payment at a whopping $745, more and more people are having a hard time keeping up. But it's not just car debt that most of us are struggling with. Add in your personal loans, credit cards, or even medical bills, keeping up with all of this debt can be a real struggle. And no matter how much you make, it can be hard to pay down those balances. Falling behind on your debt can feel overwhelming. But you don't have to figure it out all on your own. And that's where today's sponsor, PDS Debt, comes in. PDS Debt helps hardworking people like you and me get out of financial debt. And they've already helped over 100,000 people get out of that debt trap. So how can PDS Debt help you? PDS Debt uses the latest financial data to match you with perfect options that will get you on the path to becoming debt-free. With PDS Debt, you can finally hit that reset button on your debt. This isn't some one-size-fits-all solution. It's tailored just for you. PDS Debt is here to help you save more, pay off your debt faster, and finally keep your hard-earned money where it belongs, in your pocket. PDS Debt has plans for every situation, and they're here to help you take control of your financial future. Debt doesn't have to control your life anymore. Get your free assessment at pdsdebt.com/motorfeed and find your path to financial freedom. You're only 30 seconds away from taking your first step. Visit pdsdebt.com/motorfeed today. Now let's get back to the rest of this video. And then there was also another recall where over 1 million Ford vehicles, that's pretty much across the board, just about every Ford model that was out, was recalled because the rear camera might just fail and not work. And obviously, if you're backing up, that is a huge problem if you can't see. Now, I come from the generation to where backup cameras weren't a thing, and so if my camera went out, I could back up on my own. It's called looking behind you and left and right at the same time. I would also say don't 100% rely on your backup camera, because some of the angles can be misleading and you might miss something. So pay a little extra special attention when you're backing up, even if you got a camera. But going back to that brake failure, it wasn't just the Super Duties that had that problem. They recalled over 250,000 Expeditions and the Lincoln Navigator for that same brake issue as well. Now, as far as which Ford vehicles had the most recalls this year, number one on the list for Ford vehicles with the most recalls is surprisingly the Ford Explorer. So far this year, this vehicle is the number one on the list for the most recalls. Second on that list is not here at the Ford dealership, but that's the Lincoln Aviator. That's number 2 for the most recalls of Ford this year. Now, the next 3 might actually surprise you. And I will say one thing about the trucks is they're not in the top 5 of recalls, which I find very interesting. As far as full-size truck goes, they're off of the top 5. But number 3 is the baby Bronco. The Ford Bronco Sport has the 3rd highest amount of recalls from Ford. Now, moving right along to 4th place is something that I didn't think was on the list, but it is on the list, and that would be the Ford Bronco. The full-size Bronco is number 4 on the list of most recalled Ford vehicles. And I want to take a second, though, to point out this trim level that just came in. This is probably the coolest. I think if you're going to get a Bronco and just it's fun and not a daily driver, the 2-door is the way to go, despite the recalls. I mean, look at that thing. It looks so good. This color is really awesome. It's like a really interesting, like, brown color. And with the Sasquatch package and 35s, it just looks kind of angry. But there you go. 4th on the list, the full-size Bronco. Now, number 5 on the list actually caught me by surprise because it's had a lot of recalls as well. And that would be the Ford Maverick. This is number 5 on the list of most recalled vehicles this year for Ford. And it's actually one of their vehicles that's made in Mexico. So I'm not sure if it's a supplier issue or just a lack of quality control. coming from that factory. But there you go, number 5 on the list, the Ford Maverick. Now there is one Ford vehicle that's felt overall pretty safe from the recall so far, and it really has only had one major issue, and that's the Mustang. The Mustang has been pretty safe so far from any kind of really crazy recalls, and it's been low on the list as far as the number of vehicles that have been recalled. It's probably one of the least recalled Ford vehicles right now. And one of the problems with this was only with the automatic transmission. They had an issue with the automatic transmission that could cause failure, but that was fixed as well. Now, as I was walking this lot, I did find a couple of things that I thought were really interesting that I haven't seen at any other Ford dealer. And we're moving on from recalls real quick because I want to show you something cool. I found an F-250 Super Duty single cab long bed, and this is the first one I've seen at any of the Ford dealerships. It's pretty much a unicorn. I don't come across these very often, and I'm wondering if this was just even special order, but I guess it would have a sold sign on it. But I'm curious what a 250 Super Duty single cab costs, and it's always more than I think right now. 2026 4x4 regular cab F-250 with the long bed and the 6.8 liter V8 engine and the 10-speed. But the price is $53,295. But that's not the only two-door single cab truck that I found. Usually I never see one of these in the single cab, at least on lots. But I found a couple of interesting trucks here. They're all work truck kind of spec, but I found a white XL with just the extended cab, and I'm curious how much this is. It's got the 5-liter V8, and it's $52,290. $52, same price as the Super Duty two-door. But they also have a single cab version of this work truck. And so remember, that work truck with the extended cab was $52. Here's an F-150 single cab XL. This has the 2.7 liter V6 EcoBoost, and it's $46,400. Honestly, this should be under $40,000 all day. This is like a $35,000 truck in my eyes. Again, with the crazy prices, but I'm sure like the other dealership I went to in the last video, there's probably discounts on these, but this video isn't about discounts. I did that in the last one. Now, while Ford is the undisputed champion of recalls in 2025, they're not the only brand that's having a lot of issues that need to be recalled. Volkswagen is second, General Motors is third, FCA USA, which is like Dodge, Ram, other Stellantis products, etc., is fourth. Surprisingly, Mercedes is fifth with the most recalls this year. And rounding out the pack is a surprising sixth is Honda, but they didn't have a lot of recalls. They only had 9 so far this year. And they're tied with Mercedes with 9 as well. Now I want to move away from Ford because they're not the only ones with a bunch of recalls. So now it's time to talk about the 4 or 5 other brands that have the most recalls and are kind of the least reliable on this list. And then after that, we'll move to the 4 or 5 most reliable brands that you could look at in 2025. And I'll talk about the cars to avoid on that bad list and the cars that are actually good on the ones to buy list. But next on the list after Ford with most recalls is actually Volkswagen Audi Group. Now there's one caveat here that none of these other brands actually come anywhere close to the number of recalls that Ford has. As an example, Volkswagen has only had around 14 or 15 compared to Ford's over 108 recalls. So 14, 15 compared to 108 is honestly a drop in the bucket. But they do have 4 vehicles at Volkswagen Audi that have had the most recalls. And one of those on that list is the Volkswagen ID4. And according to this article, it says it's a weird recall. And this is pretty interesting here on this ID4. It's kind of goofy. It says the electric VW ID Buzz was recalled because its third row bench seat is too wide for the number of seatbelts provided. And so a bench seat being too wide for the number of seatbelts is kind of a weird issue, to be honest. That doesn't make sense to me, but I guess if you don't have enough seatbelts for the people in that row, then that's a problem. It's a big safety issue. Another vehicle on the list of most recalled Audi Volkswagen vehicles is the little Audi Q5. This one has had a few problems on a recall as well. And this article I'm looking at doesn't get into super specifics. If you want to look up specifics for each car and the problems that they have, just do a quick Google search. I'm just telling you the vehicles on each of this list that just had the most recalls out of those brands. So far we got the Audi Q5, the Volkswagen ID4. The next vehicle on the Audi list is the Q4 e-tron. And I'm trying to show you what it looks like, but These are all Q5s, Q7. I don't see Q4 e-tron anywhere around here, but Q4 e-tron is on the list, so look up what's wrong with that. And that's going to do it for the top 4 of Volkswagen Audi as far as recalls. Again, only around 14 for this year, and that's really not that bad at all. And the issues seem to be not that serious. Now, these next 2 brands on the most recalled list might not surprise you, but again, going down, it's way less than the number of Ford, and it's surprising how many recalls Ford has had over these next 2 American brands. And the next one on this list is GM, and they've only had 11 recalls this year, which is not bad compared to the 108 that Ford has had. But I would say the recall on GM is major because it's pretty much every truck and SUV that uses the 6.2 liter V8 engine, which means it's over 600,000 GM vehicles. That includes the Escalade, the Silverado, the Suburban, Tahoe, GMC Sierra, GMC Yukon, and of course the Chevy 1500 series of trucks. And basically on that recall list of the V8 engine is complete engine failure. So if you're looking at a GM vehicle, make sure if you're buying a used one that recall has been fixed for the engine, or if you're buying a new one, that it's not going to have any issues in the future. And then for the next one, I'm actually here at Ram, Dodge, Jeep, because they're further down the list of GM, which actually is pretty surprising, and that actually makes them the most reliable of the big 3. Ford being the worst, GM being second. But Dodge, Ram, and Jeep being the most reliable of the big 3 comes as a huge surprise to me. And what's interesting is Jeep isn't on the list of major recalls. There hasn't really been any major recalls for Jeep this year whatsoever, except for the 2017 and 2019 Cherokee. And then moving on, Alfa Romeo, the 23 and 25 Tonale has been recalled. The 23 to 25 Dodge Hornet has been recalled. And then there's a few recalls on the 2025 Ram 1500s. And as far as the next to last on this list, it's not even an American brand that's been recalled. And it's actually pretty convenient because I'm in a spot where most of these dealers are close now, and I don't have to keep hopping in the car driving. But the next on that list is Mercedes. And with Mercedes, there hasn't been very many recalls. It's just 9 so far this year. And for Mercedes, that includes the 21 to 23 Mercedes-Benz S-Class, the 25 Benz G-Class, and there's a few electric models that have been recalled as well. And as far as the S-Class goes, there's some sort of brake fluid leak that needs to be fixed, and obviously leaking brake fluid is not good, so if you've got one of these models on the S-Class, make sure you get your brake fluid checked, make sure there's nothing dripping in your driveway. And if you're really concerned on a 21 to 23 S-Class, go ahead, just take it to the dealer, have them take a look at it, see if it's on the list of recalls. And then on a Mercedes, there's actually a huge fire risk in some of their EV models. So if you have any of the electric Mercedes vehicles, you need to just come in, have it looked at, and make sure it's not going to catch on fire. Now moving on to the last brand on the lowest totem of the recall list, which means they've had the lowest amount of recalls out of the most brands with recalls, if that makes sense, is Honda, which is surprising. I didn't think Honda would ever top a list of recalls. And according to this article, Honda has logged 9 recalls this year, affecting over 469,000 vehicles. And the most significant issue is just a software glitch in the fuel injection system that may cause engine stalling or a complete loss of power. And that's in the new Honda Pilot and MDX models. Nothing in the Civic or anything like that, or the Accord. Those are totally fine. So that's going to be the 2014 to 2020 MDX, the 2025 MDX, and the 23 to 25 Honda Pilot. But now I want to move on to the most reliable brands, and this little switch up scenario might shock you because there was a brand that was always the most reliable vehicle you could ever buy, most reliable brand, and they've been knocked down on the totem pole a couple of pegs. Well, now it's time to show you what the most reliable car brand of 2025 is so far, and this one might actually surprise you. This brand actually knocked Toyota and Lexus down from the #1 spot, and that would be Subaru. You would never think Subaru would be the most reliable vehicles, because back in the day, a lot of the WRX and STI motors would be very unreliable and have a lot of problems. That might be due to people tuning them way beyond what they can handle, but anyways, that's for another time. But as you can see here on this list, Subaru is #1 on Consumer Reports, and this is based on a lot of owner feedback and also the number of recalls. Subaru just has pretty much the least number of recalls out of all these brands, and I think because Toyota has had a lot of problems with their new twin turbo engines on their trucks and some other issues with the new Tacoma that have caused a lot of recalls as well, that took Toyota and Lexus down from the #1 spot. And that now makes Subaru the most reliable car that you can buy right now. And I was talking to some of the sales guys up front, and they said the #1 most reliable Subaru that you can buy right now is actually the Subaru Forester. And I think it's a pretty good looking SUV. And it's also not too pricey compared to a lot of the other stuff we looked at, and especially compared to buying like a new pickup truck right now. These all look pretty close to like the same trim level. They're all touring. This one's a hybrid, which will make it more expensive. But I want to see how much a touring would cost on this. So we'll look at this gray one right here. And like most Subarus, it's all-wheel drive. So this is right in line with the average price of a new vehicle right now. The average price of most new vehicles, like from the expensive to the cheap, the middle ground is about $48,000 right now, which is really, really high. Over the past few years, the prices of cars have gone up. But this is a 2025 Forester Touring for $45,112. And I want to see if there's any other trim levels that are a little bit lower. This is a Wilderness Edition, and it's a little less at $40,320. I'm trying to see which one is the cheapest out of these Foresters. This one doesn't have any kind of fancy badges on it. We've got a 25 Forester Premium at $36,962. So we're down to $36,000 on the least expensive one that I can find. I am curious on another vehicle real quick while we're here, the Crosstrek, because I think it's a pretty cool looking Subaru daily driver, and if you get like a trim level like this, you could probably have a little bit of fun in it. And it's $34,960. Looking at the prices of other vehicles like cars and getting away from trucks for a minute makes you realize that not everything is super overpriced. The truck market is just completely insane, but it definitely looks like if you want a car or a crossover Subaru, it's going to be like a better bargain. Now, I do have one issue with Subaru, and that's with this one specific vehicle. That's the new WRX. It's been softened. It's not as cool and as fun anymore as they used to be. It definitely looks more like an average daily driver that you could pick up. And most WRX fans are pretty upset about it, and supposedly they're not going to be making an STI version. So without an STI WRX, I think it takes a lot of the fun out of Subaru. That's just my opinion. Toyota used to be the most reliable back when the Tundra had the V8 engine. That 5.7 liter iForce V8 in the Tundras like this or in the older Sequoias was just a bulletproof engine, and some of them have even gone over 1 million miles without a rebuild. But with the new turbo one, that's just not the case anymore. The turbo Tundras have just had a lot of problems with their engines, and so they had a major recall, basically where you had to replace it. And hopefully Toyota gets all the kinks worked out and becomes a reliable brand again. Now, they're still reliable. They're in 3rd place and Lexus is in 2nd. So it's not like they're completely tanking in quality or reliability. But when Subaru beats you, you really need to take a look at what you're doing. But there you have it. The most reliable car brand that you can get right now is Subaru. If you want a reliable car, then you're gonna wanna stick in the top 5. That's going to be Subaru, Lexus, Toyota, Honda, and then Acura. That rounds out the top 5 of the most reliable vehicle brands that you can buy right now. Anyways, that's going to do it for today's video. If you made it this far, then please subscribe so you can see more content, and then hit that like button so this information gets across to more people. And I'll see you in the next video.